You've probably seen that the IOPC is pressuring Manchester Evening News to tell them who leaked the CCTV footage to the Manchester airport incident. Now, you'll certainly have seen that if you watched my video yesterday, but I'd like to offer a few more thoughts here on Black Belt Secrets. So please do subscribe if you like this alternative to my main channel. But let's get to it. Let's have a bit of a refresh and a recap first of all. This airport incident was where the police, they say, were originally called to what they called an altercation between members of the public. Now, it would seem that there's a lot more to it than that, and that's about all I can say. Because this is obviously a live investigation, they've been arrested, so proceedings are live and so on. So I'm not going to comment too much about it, save for what's been reported that's happened already. The police then said that they were subjected to what they called a violent assault whilst trying to make an arrest. That was Greater Manchester Police. You could then see one of the male police officers aiming the taser at this guy whilst he was laying on the ground, and then he appeared to kick and stamp on his head, and then there was all sorts of chaotic scenes and so on. And these videos were, well, the first one was published and the CCTV was apparently leaked. But then, after that, the Manchester Evening News received letters from the IOPC. Now, for those international viewers that have no idea what we're talking about, this is the Independent Office for Police Conduct. They look at police officers' conduct and determine whether or not they've fallen short of their professional standards and duties. So they wrote to Manchester Evening News on the 23rd of August and the 3rd of September. And the news company reports that they were seeking to access the CCTV footage and asked questions designed to identify the source. So they seem to be somewhat cryptic questions, but nonetheless trying to find out who it was that leaked this CCTV footage to the press in the first place. The news company said, "We denied these requests because it is journalistic material, and the provision of material, like the CCTV footage, to the press is a cornerstone of our democracy." And in a further letter from the IOPC, the police watchdog said, and I quote, "We are conducting a criminal investigation into the provision of the CCTV footage to Manchester Evening News, specifically the footage from Manchester Airport relating to the incident which occurred on the 23rd of July. They asked them to confirm whether they hold the original video, whether they be prepared to supply it for inspection, whether they consider the material sensitive, and the investigator asked them to list all additional material that they hold in relation to the case. But the Manchester Evening News has declined to enter into any conversations about the source, saying that the protection of sources of information is a key journalistic principle. Now, just to reiterate what I said first of all in my Black Belt Barrister video yesterday, journalists can withhold the identity of their source, save except for the rarest of circumstances where a court will order it because it's of absolute paramount importance. And there's very narrow exceptions when they do that. And even when they do, it will be very limited in the way that that is then ordered and carried out. But I wanted to speak more generally in this video. So aside from that case, because I can't speak too specifically about that case still, but more generally about the leaking of information, the leaking of CCTV footage and so on, because there are certain protections. It doesn't apply to everybody, but there are certain protections. And there are certain situations where you might believe that even if it might amount to an offence, it should still be in the public interest, because as many journalists have argued that there should be a full-blown public interest defence for people whistleblowing and leaking material and so on. This has been something of a very widespread conversation. Now, we do have the Public Interest Disclosure Act of 1998, which very broadly speaking protects anyone who's considered a worker for the purposes of employment law. So sadly it doesn't cover volunteers or generally self-employed people, but it does cover people that are employed. Now, how it works is that those people receive protection when they reasonably believe that they are disclosing information that is in the public interest. and this is then referred to as a qualifying disclosure. Now, the person making this disclosure must reasonably believe that whatever is happening either now or in the past or is likely to happen in the future has something to do with a criminal offence, the breach of a legal obligation, a miscarriage of justice, a danger to health and safety of any individual, damage to the environment, or deliberate concealment of information about any of these things. Furthermore, there are certain types of protected disclosures. This includes disclosure to an employer. So, for example, a worker will be protected if they make a qualifying disclosure to their employer, and this applies right from their direct line manager right up to the CEO or the chair of the board of the trustees. It includes the disclosure to a regulator or any other prescribed person, or indeed, as a third alternative, disclosure to the wider public. So this includes whistleblowing to the media, including on social media, campaigning organisations, or indeed to the police. But to be a protected whistleblowing disclosure under the Act, the worker then needs to satisfy a number of conditions. These, of course, mean that the disclosure must be under reasonable circumstances. It must not be for the personal gain of that person making the disclosure. This is where people refer to as a good leaker or a bad leaker. A bad leaker would be someone who's doing it for their own personal gain. But important to note that this protected type of disclosure does not generally apply to Crown servants, which includes police officers, those involved in national security, or indeed if someone is committing an offence by making that disclosure, or if the information that's been leaked is protected and subject to legal professional privilege by way of example, or some other claim or duty of confidentiality. So there are certain situations where the person will not be protected, and thus makes for a very broad discussion as to whether there really should be a broad, wide sweeping protection in the name of public interest for someone to make a disclosure like this. But there are, of course, some situations where people understand that they absolutely cannot make this kind of disclosure, for example, where they are subject to the Official Secrets Act and so on, and otherwise where it might be an offence to leak certain information, even if that's to the press, even if they believe that's in the public interest. But I found this to be, coming back to this case, I found this to be a rather bizarre update that they are now pressing the news company for this information, because notwithstanding there may be various complications and details to which I'm not privy about the leaking of the information. Obviously all of those depend on who leaked it and from where and so on, so I'm not going to speculate, but there will be details there. The police might have their guesses and that's a matter for them. But notwithstanding all of that, the newspaper, unless ordered by a judge, will and quite rightly should protect the identity of the sources of this information. I'm sure most people working at an organisation has at some stage seen something by someone or even by the company themselves that they don't agree with. I've certainly contracted with many companies in the past, and I've seen behaviour and I've seen things that I really don't agree with. I've seen nepotism, I've seen cronyism, all sorts of different things within the workplace, within organisations that really hadn't ought to take place in a very sensible and civil world. But we all know that to some extent those things do happen in a wide spectrum of companies. But I wanted to do this additional video here on secrets for a bit of a wider discussion about these things generally, because many of you might have been in the position where you've either leaked something before or you've felt the need to leak something before, and you might want to talk about that. And more broadly as well, I did a video on the Dyson libel case against Channel 4, which they dropped because lots of people have complained about being threatened with a lawsuit or actually being sued for something they've said online, whether that is a commentary, an opinion, a review about a product or a company, all these sort of things. And I've seen lots of videos of people being extremely distraught, going through these processes, these exchanges of being threatened with a lawsuit or actually being sued. I mentioned briefly in that video, I currently have a case against me at the moment. I consider that to be what we refer to as a SLAP, which is a strategic lawsuit against public participation. So it is as it sounds. It's a lawsuit that is strategically either threatened or brought to prevent somebody from publicly commenting on what they consider wrongdoing or bad behavior or whatever. And so if you are making public statements or public reviews or things like that, if they are your opinion and it's an opinion that somebody could reasonably hold if they are in possession of the same set of facts as you, then that is a perfectly legitimate opinion, and any lawsuit is likely to go nowhere. If it is a genuine opinion that you reasonably hold, and any person would reasonably hold with the same set of facts, that is just your reasonable opinion. The alternative might be that it's true. If you say, let's say someone was previously convicted of fraud, and you say this is a dishonest person, that is quite a bold statement to make. They might allege defamation against you. But if they are convicted of a dishonesty offence, you can argue in various jurisdictions, there's versions of this in law in each jurisdiction, but you can argue that that is true or substantially true, as we have here in the UK. If you make a statement against somebody and they threaten you with a defamation lawsuit, you can respond to say, well, it is substantially true. You have a conviction for dishonesty, be it theft or burglary or fraud or whatever. If you've said that they are, no one should listen to you because you are a dishonest person, or you have a history of dishonesty, or words to that effect, you could argue that it's substantially true, even though they might be telling the truth about this now, but your statement to the effect that they are generally a dishonest person or have been in the past could be substantially true. Or even if you said, well, in my opinion, what you're saying is rubbish because you've been proven to be dishonest. You're a proven liar. You're a proven fraud. Therefore, in my opinion, no one should listen to you now. There's all sorts of nuances here as to how far you can take those statements and how far you can prove that the opinion was reasonable, or how far you can prove that it's substantially true, so as to make it a full defense to defamation. So if you're leaving those reviews, so long as it's your own opinion and it's a genuine opinion, generally I think you're free to make those. And if these companies are threatening to sue you for those, for example, I've got one at the moment. I'm not going to name them right now in this video, but I have a product that was in the region of £300. It worked perfectly fine. It was good. I used it maybe 4 or 5 times, literally 4 or 5 times, because I have at least 6 or 7 others of the same sort. I will give more details later, I promise you, but I have at least 6 or 7 of the same sort. So I used this one maybe 4 or 5 times or thereabouts over a couple of years. It stopped working properly. They now say, and I believe that it was under warranty, but they now say that it's going to cost over £425 to repair this thing, even though I bought it, and it still retails today for 300 and something pounds. So that just doesn't make sense to me. That's absolutely bizarre. It's absolutely ridiculous. And so I might be making further comment about that, all very genuinely, all my opinion and so on. But I just thought I'd make this video because there might be all sorts of people that are interested in making a disclosure because they see wrongdoing and they want to call out wrongdoing. And I think that it's absolutely right that you should be able to do that. This is part of a very much wider discussion, and I invite your comments in the comment section below. Let me know what you think. Thank you for watching. Please do leave me your comments, and don't forget to subscribe if you do like this alternative, rambly thought, wider discussion on these things, and I'll see you next time.